What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the Union Fitness Podcast. As always, I'm Jared.
I'm Kurt. We're coming at you today. Beautiful day. Weather's finally getting nice outside.
And we're stuck in here.
But we're stuck in here together and with you guys, so it's going to be all right. So today's topic, yesterday I'm driving home. Sun was setting. I was like, man, it feels good to be another year older. And in the process, I was thinking about my training and lifting in general, not just powerlifting, but when I started lifting to right now. And I was like, man, this would be a great conversation to think about and to discuss how my training has evolved, the things that I've learned, how I've applied it to clients and members and things like that. So I come in the gym today and I see Jared and I'm like, hey man, this is what I'm thinking about doing today. And I start explaining it and he looks at me and says, that's hilarious, because I was thinking the exact same thing.
Yep.
So what we're going to do, I know we've given you guys backgrounds by now. You probably know us, know how we train, things like that. But we're going to talk about a little bit about our philosophy or lack thereof when we first started training.
Oh, yeah.
Because most of the time you don't know where you're going, which is perfectly fine. And then talk about how we got from there to where we are now, the steps that we've taken, the things we've learned, how we've applied it.
Some big mistakes along the way.
Yeah, you have to make mistakes. And kind of what we think would be beneficial for people regardless of where they're at. So let's start it up. I don't think I've ever asked you how many years you've actually been lifting.
Oh, boy.
Like just lifting in general. So first time you touched the bar.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I played sports like through junior high and high school, and you have like weight room time there. I think the actual first time I ever started lifting was probably around 8th grade.
Okay.
So I think I brought this up before, but my dad used to compete in powerlifting, and he's coming back.
Yeah.
George is on the comeback. But
George, we see you.
So I used to go with him when I was a kid. I used to think it was the coolest thing. They could move a ton of weight around. And when I was in 8th grade, we had to do this like long-term goal project. And I'm in 8th grade. I don't really know what my long-term goals are. And my dad was like lifting weights and stuff. And I was like, I want to be able to bench press X amount of weight, right?
Sure.
So I think I set the project is like, I'm going to bench press 155 pounds or something like that.
In
so
8th grade?
Yeah.
That's legit.
Little 80-pound me would go down. Right? We had a little power rack in our basement, and like it was supposed to be, my plan was for myself 4 times a week I'd go down and just like bench press and do whatever. My dad was helping me out. Obviously, I'm immature. I'm in 8th grade, so I do it like once or twice a week and not very consistently.
Sure.
But ended up I did bench press 155 pounds in 8th grade, and that kind of like, I thought it was really cool. I was like, oh man, I'm really strong now. That's a lot of weight. That's more than I weigh. So that kind of like put a little fire under my butt. And then from there, it was just through high school sports, like wrestling specifically. We'd always be in the weight room same time as the football team. And that was always fun. Like I'd always go lift with the linemen. I always thought that was fun to like, they'd be lifting. I'd jump in, little old me would pick it up.
Yeah.
That was fun.
Did you have guidance of any sort, like from anybody at the high school, like any coaches or anything?
So yeah, sort of. So when I was younger in high school, it was just your regular coaches. My wrestling coach, Dr. Miller, was actually really pretty knowledgeable in the weight room. So he would help us out a lot. That dude was also an animal. He was like, what was he, in his 60s? And he would just go under a bar, bench 225 for 10, jump up and do like 30 pull-ups in a row.
Nice.
Like 10 rounds of that. Nice. I don't know. He was an animal.
His last name's Miller.
Oh, yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. But then, so I think it was my senior year, our high school dumped a bunch of money into renovating this like multi-million-dollar weight room. It's really nice. And they actually hired a personal trainer, strength coach to like work in the weight room to help out the students. His name was Phil. And I think Phil was like the first like real guidance I had in high school on like how to lift things. Along with my dad, he's a track coach too. He was in there. But yeah, what about you?
The first time I actually touched a barbell and had any concept of what to possibly do, I was 19 years old. Before that, my dad had one of those old school like benches and weight sets upstairs in our spare bedroom.
The cement ones?
The cement weights, and the bar is legitimately like that big around. You know what I mean? And then when you lay on the bench, the rack is like right next to your face.
Yep.
So like if you're any normal size human, you're not fitting into this thing. But I was, man, I want to say like 14, 15, somewhere around there. And I go up there and you've never seen, like I never saw anybody lift weights before. So I just go up there and think about what I'm supposed to do. And I remember one time I had like 6 5-pound plates on each side because none of them are big. There's no 45s.
Yeah.
They're all the real small ones. And I hit like a set of bench, almost died. I think it was like 60 pounds or something like that. And then I take all the 45s off and the bar comes up and smacks me right in the jaw, right? That was the last time I lifted until I was like 18 or 19 years old, right? So it didn't like split me open or anything, but I was like, man, screw that. Screw that.
Don't need this.
Yeah. So of course, I get to high school and our school was known for a very good soccer program and a pretty good baseball program. And the coaches that I had at the time, especially my soccer coaches, did not believe in lifting at all. They were old school. It was all about the sport, the practice, and then running. And I'm saying we used to run sometimes upwards of 5 miles every day before we could touch a soccer ball.
Dang.
And their philosophy was if we got in good enough shape, then we could outlast the other team. And I got to be honest, it worked. It worked because in the last quarter of the game, we would just out hustle everybody. When they got tired, we started scoring goals. And so it was cool. But knowing that, I would love to see what we could have done if we had some type of weight training program, because we had the weight room and all of the football coaches were kind of like the strength coaches for the football team. So, I didn't really know that much until I had a good friend of mine. I think we talked about this, that was in a car accident. And right before he got in the car accident, he asked me to go in the weight room with him. And then after, his accident, he was in the hospital and I just kept going back in training. Mm-hmm. Didn't know a thing about what I was doing, didn't know anything. I was that dude that everybody was benching and I was so scared and shy that I would go over in the corner and deadlift. Because there's one thing I knew how to do from working with my dad. It was pick shit up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I would go over there. Everybody else was over benching. And that's kind of how I got started. And from there, I just fell in love with the process.
That's awesome. So when, kind of what started you off into, obviously you're a very good power lifter. What started you off into powerlifting, and kind of how did you, I guess, like what kind of program or training did you start with? And what did you see from it?
Yeah, I think about this often, and I still haven't stumbled upon like a direct answer. When I first got into lifting seriously, I was more into like bodybuilding because I always used to, my parents got me a subscription to Muscle and Fitness. And it was like, we're doing, sets of 10, sets of 12, stuff like that on everything. So that's how I trained for a little bit. And then I dabbled in Olympic lifting a little bit, which I liked, but I didn't know anybody who did that could help me. So when I went to college, I stumbled upon Elite FTS, shout out. And it was the only place that I had found that had all this accessible information. I mean, you're talking article upon article from the top people in the industry, coaches, lifters, whatever. And it was, all the way from training to nutrition to what to do, what not to do, who to reach out to. And so I would stay up until like 2 a.m, 3 a.m. in college, just reading articles. And I was like, oh shit, this thing called powerlifting looks kind of fun. Like you don't have to run, because I was tired of running from soccer. Mm-hmm. And you just get to like pick stuff up. And all these guys look jacked. So I started researching it, started trying it a little bit. At the time, I think the stuff that I was reading was like the sweet spot is like just sets of 5. So I did like 5x5 forever. And it worked. I mean, I got strong. And then I think like Wendler's 531 was coming out. Mm-hmm. So I dabbled in that. And again, because I was so new,
you got strong.
I got strong. And then one of my buddies back home, Tyler Bledsoe, we knew each other from school, but we're never friends. He was like, hey man, I see you lifting. Like, I'm lifting too. And I'm actually doing a powerlifting meet coming up in Maryland, like Frederick or something. So I went with him and checked it out, and I was like, man, that's pretty cool. But we trained together for a couple years, but didn't really have any mentoring or.
You just figured it out as you went.
It was legitimately like we would train together, and then go home and read something online, and then come back the next day and be like, hey, I saw this. We're gonna try it today, and it was so much fun. Like I almost missed that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I still kind of have those days occasionally. Like yesterday, I trained without a plan. I walked in and I was like, I just feel like training.
Mm-hmm.
And it was awesome. But I think like the first mentor that I had was a guy named Dan from Washington State. And he moved down to Maryland. And he was like in his 50s.
Mm-hmm.
And he was wearing a West Side barbell shirt. And I had just heard about West Side, right? Because I was following Elite. So I go up to him and I was like, hey man, nice shirt. I'm just trying to feel cool and sound like I lift. I didn't know anything about West Side. And I go up to him, I'm like, hey man, nice shirt. He's like, yeah, you want to train tomorrow? I'm like, sure. He's like, all right,
crack, sure.
Yeah, be here at 4. So I go in there at 4:00. First day, we're benching. He puts me in a bench shirt, reverse band bench to a 3 board. All right. So the most gangster overkill thing that you could do, my first day, he does it. At the time, my best bench was like 255.
I love this. Yeah. I love this.
At the time, my best bench was like 255. And he knew that. Mm-hmm. I told him. I didn't lie. And he pulls out an old bench shirt. Like it wasn't that old actually, but a Titan Katana. Uh-huh. So it was a single ply.
Yep.
But they're legit. And he was like, this one will fit you perfect. And it was still like a size or two too big. And I thought I was going to die. I didn't know what reverse band benching was. And I barely knew what board pressing was. So he's like, all right, we're going to work up to a max single. All right. So
this is awesome.
He gets me in a bench shirt. I'm walking around like this.
Like an ape.
Looking ridiculous. This is a YMCA with 1 squat rack and 1 bench.
This is awesome.
And we're benching in the squat rack. So
because you have the bands, you gotta.
We had to. Everybody was pissed off. All right. So I come out there. He lays me down. We're setting up the bands. He's calculating the weights. He's holding the boards on my chest. And I think I ended up working up. I think I did 405.
Jeez.
But here's the thing. Looking back, why was I even in a bench shirt?
Yeah.
I was doing a 3-board press against reverse bands.
Yeah.
What?
Just think of the difference, 405 and 255.
What was I even doing? So look, it hit me so hard. I had like flu-like symptoms the rest of the week. Because my central nervous system was like, what the hell did you just do? You know? So Dan was that guy. You know, he was wise. He did a lot of gear lifting. And he really got me started. Now, it wasn't always the best advice, but he pushed me. And I did things that I normally wouldn't have done. And I just shut up and listened. Every single day I showed up. I would ask questions, but I would never argue. And that was just kind of what I carried with me. Like when you are lifting with somebody who's been doing it longer than you do the work, you load the plates, you spot, you help, and you're just there.
Yep.
And that's kind of that from that moment on. Even though he might not have been the best mentor, he put that fire in my belly. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that was it.
That's awesome. Yeah. So I think, oh boy, I mean, I've known powerlifting my whole life just because of my dad. Mm-hmm. When I was in high school, I realized I was pretty strong. Like I was lifting with alignment. I could, do a bunch of stuff that was like pretty, good for my weight. And so I told my dad, I was like, I want to try this. And so he got excited, right? So he hands me a basic. It was a 5x5 program. I trained 4 days a week. It was squat, bench, deadlift.
Felt jacked.
It's actually every day that I lifted. It was 4 days a week. I would squat, bench, and deadlift 5x5 of each. And then he had different accessories programmed for every day, right? Like my dad was the encyclopedia of powerlifting to me, right? Like he knew it all because he did it.
Smartest man alive.
Yeah, so he programmed for me, and I got really strong from it. But it was funny. So like he bought me a bench shirt. I had like a single ply squat suit. Yeah, I'm like 18,
nice.
and yeah. I still have the squat suit. I'll bring it in sometime. Yeah. So he did that. I got like super strong from it, like just in high school. Carried over to like my wrestling and stuff. But I think what was it like? I get to Slippery Rock. I stopped lifting for a little bit because I don't know, I was by myself. I didn't really have
Mhm.
friends that were interested in lifting. So I just started doing, I would run and I would do push-ups and pull-ups, and that's all I did.
Mhm.
And then eventually it was like my junior year, I think. I had my friends Mike and Adam. Josh actually trains Mike
Yeah.
right now.
Yep.
And then our buddy Adam. We all lived on the same floor in the dorm. And I was like, I want to get back into lifting weights. And I started going, and then they started coming with me.
Mhm.
And the next thing you know, we're just like making up powerlifting programs.
Yes.
Like I pulled out the old 5x5. We all did that, and then we got bored of that. So then we Google some stuff.
Yeah.
We did like Ed Cohn's thing, I think, for a while.
Yep.
And then we did some like some, it was called like a Russian program. We thought it was cool because it was Russian, so we did that. And I mean, like when I tell you that I did not know like what my form and stuff was supposed to look like I would sit my butt on the floor when I squatted and then shoot my butt back up in the air and just good morning all my squats.
Wait, that's not what you're supposed to do?
I mean, I still do it, I guess.
Oh.
I'm just
All
kidding.
right.
My deadlift got really good from it, I guess.
Yeah,
So
right.
like my squat wasn't great, but my deadlift got really strong.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that was kind of like how we always planned on competing and never did when we were at Slippery Rock. But that was kind of like how I really got into it on my own. Flash forward a little bit, I get into PT school. I'm there and we're studying a whole bunch. Class is getting pretty hard, and I'm like, any free time I have, I'm like jittery. I need to find something to do.
Yeah.
So I start going to the weight room again, and I didn't know what to do. So I'm like YouTubing like weird, cool things that people do, right? So I'm doing like dumbbell snatches with as much weight as I could. So I think the weight room at Wingate had like up to 100-pound dumbbells. So I would like do dumbbell snatches with those, and I thought that was cool, and I got bored of that. So then I was like, I can do a human flag, or I can do this. And then eventually like I just started getting bored of all these little things. And I remembered that I used to like powerlifting. So I was like, I'm going to give this a shot. So I started doing it. And I forget what I jumped in on, just some random program that I found. And then one of my best friends, his name's Colby Lopresti. He's also a physical therapist. He's down in South Carolina. He was in school with me there. He got interested in it after I did a meet there, my first meet. I signed up for it. Didn't actually train for it when I signed up. Went and like did really well. So I was like, oh, maybe I could be good at this. And that's kind of what started. He came and then decided he wanted to train with me. So then that kind of fueled our fire. And we just did the stupidest stuff you could think of, man. I mean, like the volume and weight and the amount of like, it's not okay.
But here's the thing. And this is kind of where we were going to lead. You could get away with it then, right?
It was still new.
You were such a young, new lifter.
Yeah.
That you were responding to it.
Yeah.
Right?
And being in PT school, like we're learning how to move and stuff. So we would help each other, like what form was supposed to look like a little bit. And that kind of helped some, we didn't know everything obviously, but we tried.
Yeah.
And being so new, like we'd be in the gym for 3 hours, just not stopping. We'd do, I don't even know. If Colby ever listens to this, I'm sure he'll remember. But we did, I'm sure, like 100 reps of heavy squats, and then went to 100 reps of like something so stupid. But we survived.
Yeah, you force that adaptation. You know what I mean? And there's some to be said for not knowing what to do and just training.
Yeah.
And not to get too sidetracked, but I think that's something a lot of people could benefit from. You see, there's so much access to all these programs, all these coaches, that I think people lose sight of what it's about some days. Like, why did you start training? It was because you thought it was fun and you felt good from it, and you realized that you were pretty good, right?
Yeah.
It was a challenge. And sometimes that can be overshadowed by, I have to do this. If I don't train at 4 o'clock with these shoes, with this shirt, with, on this piece of equipment, it's not going to be
Got to
right.
bring my tripod.
You got to bring the tripod or the 2 board.
No, those are provided here.
Yeah, we got those. Yeah. But some days it's just about showing up and working.
Yeah.
And experimenting and finding new things. Because one of the worst things you can do in this is not learn for yourself. And I got to the point where I hired a coach
Amen to that.
a few years ago, right? And it was when I turned that corner and I was like, I'm ready to be the best that I can. Hired a coach. Up to that point, I had done all my programming, loosely, because you're just trying to kind of throwing stuff together. And I made good progress, but I was ready to be very motivated and do whatever I had to do. So I had 2 years, sorry, where Casey Williams programmed for me, and I learned from it, but I learned more about myself than I did the programming. I learned what I was capable of and how much work and dedication it took to get to where I wanted to be. But the actual programming in and out, I was just kind of on autopilot. I would see what I had to do that day and I would do it.
Just go do it.
And
Yeah.
I never really asked a whole lot of questions. And I think that's what a lot of people do. That's a trap they fall into.
Mm-hmm.
They say, what does my coach have me doing today? Or what does this program have me do today? And they just do it. And then 2 years down the road, you go up to them and you're like, what are you learning from that? What'd you learn? And they don't really have any answers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
that's just the sad part of it, I think, because this whole thing is the process. I don't like using the term journey, right? I think it's kind of cliche, but it's about the journey. It's not about, I want to be here. What did you learn? What did that help you with? What kind of person did that build?
Yeah. So kind of going off of that, I eventually hired a coach as well, Rob Polenic down in Brutal Iron Gym in South Carolina. Shout out, coach. So I might have said this before, but he's kind of like a family friend.
Mhm.
And I saw some of the stuff he was doing and I was like, this looks awesome. Like, he really seems to know what he's talking about. So I reached out to him and he started coaching me, and best decision I ever made. I
Mhm.
mean, like, I didn't realize how kind of poorly I was moving until he started coaching me. And like, I mean, it was like humbling. I remember just getting angry with him sometimes because he'd be like, so we're going to do some squats at like 50% of what you think you can do, pretty
Yeah.
much. And I was like, that's so dumb. Why would
Yeah.
I do that? Blah, blah, blah. And he would just shut up and do it.
Yeah.
Like, you got to fix all these things first. And I would grill him with questions all the time because, I'm a know-it-all grad student in PT school. Like,
Right.
what does he know,
Yeah.
But I mean, he always was patient with me, had answers for me. And like, the amount I've learned just from working with him has been phenomenal.
Mhm.
And I think, like you said, like, that's something you need to do with your coach. Like, your coach needs to know what they're talking about. Don't
Mhm.
just get programming from somebody because they're good. Like,
Mhm.
make sure that they're knowledgeable, and don't be afraid to ask them questions. Like, know
Yeah.
why you're doing what you're doing. Don't just, throw bands on a bar and squat against bands because you saw somebody do it at
Right.
Westside. Like, that was great for them and they needed it and there was a reason they did it.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean it's for you, you
Sure.
know?
Sure.
And that even when you're programming for yourself, like, you can play with that stuff, but you gotta sit down and analyze like how you're moving, what you're doing, and be able to figure that out on your own.
I agree. And I think that all comes in stages too.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the good thing about learning on your own at the beginning, is because you're so just general with everything. You don't have a lot of information. So you're kind of doing like the same stuff quite often.
Yeah.
You may go see a new exercise and then try it, but there's a good chance that you're going to barbell squat, barbell bench, barbell deadlift, every week. And I think starting out, that's what people need. And I think that's why not to get too deep into programming, but frequency is good amongst newer and younger lifters.
Let's dive into it a little bit, actually. I
Okay,
think it would
okay.
benefit people who like listen to the podcast some.
Sure.
I think some people kind of want some information, So for a newer lifter or someone kind of new to the sport in general, what would you say like some guidelines, recommendations are for starting?
Yeah. I would say understand movement. Understand how your body should move. If you have participated in sports for quite some time growing up, you're going to have a good awareness, good body awareness. I'm not saying that you can't if you didn't compete in sports, but that just gives you the understanding of where your body is in space and how to move. So take that from what you learned in sports and apply it to your first couple years of powerlifting. You got to look at this as a marathon, not a sprint. You have to understand when you're starting out in powerlifting, this is going to be a long process. You're not going to get to where you want to be in a year or two. So take the time now to learn your form, study other people's forms, find somebody who's built similar to you, see how they move, see how they train, things like that, and then try it on yourself. Because it's much easier to do that from day one than to only be focused on all out strength. And then 5 years down the road, realize that you move like shit and that
Yep.
you're hurting yourself or you're going to hurt yourself, and then have to take a huge step back to learn how to move correctly with these weights that you're pushing.
You taking shots at me?
I'm taking shots at me. What do you mean?
Yeah.
You fixed me before. But no, I think that's one thing that I always did too, because I didn't train with anybody when I first started. So I was hesitant, but I always made sure that I was kind of moving correctly, whatever that meant for me. You know, you gotta be smart enough, whether you have a lot of knowledge about lifting or not. If you watch a video of yourself and you see like your backgrounding, you should know that's not good.
Yeah.
Right? For the most part.
Yeah.
For the most
At
part.
least starting out, you gotta know.
Yeah.
No bueno, right?
Yeah. If you're watching a video from the front of your squat and you see your knees caving, you should know, without even having a lot of knowledge, that that's not good.
Yeah.
So it's simple things to take the time, put your ego to the side, and take the time to really work on those and focus on your movement and slow progression.
So a couple other questions then. One, how often, I'm a new lifter.
Okay.
How often should I max out?
Max out?
Yeah, how often should I max out?
Oh man. Never.
But I'm feeling strong. I want to know what I can do, man. I've been lifting for 4 weeks.
That's what the meet's for, right? That's what I mean. If you are a power lifter, when you max out, it should be at the meet. It should rarely be in training.
Mm-hmm.
As a more mature lifter, you can do it more often because you understand what it means. As a newer lifter, there's no better way to discourage yourself than to try maxing out and missing weights.
Yep.
I mean, I remember a time, one training session, I tried to deadlift the same weight 4 times and missed it 4 times.
Oh, been there, done that, man.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so what good was that? Now, in my mind going forward, I think I just automatically can't hit that weight ever. You know? So I think it's good to have some guidance, and I think lifting heavy-ish is good occasionally as a younger lifter. But as far as maxing out, unless you're in like a sports program and they are having you do a test week, which also can be borderline, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's any real reason to be maxing out.
So I'm also a newer lifter, right? And I'm coming into the gym. I know I need to squat, bench, and deadlift, but they can get kind of boring. Like, how do I focus on getting better at those 3 things, but also like not get bored with what I'm doing, right? There's so many, like you go into Union here, you got all these different bars, you got bands, you got all this crazy stuff. Everybody's doing something different. How do I keep training exciting while still getting better?
I mean, that's kind of like a double-edged sword. I mean, what's your goal? Is your goal to get better? Then you might have to suck it up and do the same stuff. I'm just being honest. You might have to do the same stuff every week. And that's where, doing research is the number one thing. Now, I understand you can go online and you can find a bajillion, that's right, a bajillion.
That's a big number.
Articles and programs. But, take the time, be patient. We have more access to quality knowledge than we ever have.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the day, it was, I got to go find somebody who knows something I don't know. Now you don't even have to leave your house. So take the time, do some research, come up with some ideas, see what fits what you have available and what your goals are.
Yeah.
Now, like as far as like mixing things up, I think, or keeping it exciting, you said, staying motivated. You have to first know why it is that you're training. Am I training because it brings me peace and happiness? And am I training because I'm angry at the world? Am I training because I want to be good at powerlifting? It doesn't matter. You have to understand why you're training. And then that needs to be your main source of drive when you're first starting. Mm-hmm. And that's usually enough to keep you going. I probably beat around the bush with that answer.
No, I think that's all like really good advice that young lifters kind of need. But I think
I have a question.
Fire it up.
Do it.
If you is it wrong to think that if you need to get away from a traditional squat, bench, and deadlift scenario, that maybe like this isn't for you?
What do you mean?
Well, like I don't understand how that becomes boring.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's you versus the weight, no matter how you're doing it. Maybe you need to change your mindset, not change your exercise.
Yeah. So I think there's people who get bored of the monotony of barbell squatting, barbell benching, deadlifting. Like I'm going in, I'm doing 5 sets of 5.
Mhm.
And that's what I do that day. But then I see all these other people doing all this fun stuff with chains and
Sure.
bands, and like it looks exciting. And here I am, just 70% of what I think I can do. I'm doing 5 reps. I'm setting it down. I count my 180 seconds,
Right.
and I go do it again.
So I think not to cut you off, but I think it comes down to staying in your lane and keeping focused, right? When you start a training program, when you start lifting, again, understand why you're lifting. And if you're lifting because you want to try something different every week, then you don't really have that direction. So if you have direction, then you know that every day you walk in, oh man, I'm doing 5x5 again. It is a little bit more weight. Maybe it's the same weight, but I know I'm going to do it better than I did last week. That's my main goal. My main goal is to be better each training session. And that carries you. When you're first starting out, learn something each training session, be better each training session. And if you do that, then you don't need to feel like you don't have enough variety or things like that. So if you walk through those doors with that mindset, then that's enough to carry you through the mundane days and you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think, so this is something actually, with my patients in therapy, what we go through is I make sure that they pretty much master a movement pattern before we start to add a lot of variation, right? So for new lifters, you want them to master the movement pattern first, right? Be a good squatter. Like make sure your squat looks pretty good. It doesn't have to be perfect. My squat's not perfect, but be a good squatter, be a good bench presser, and be a good deadlifter first, and then we can have fun variation to those things, because that's where, once the movement pattern is good, then we can start addressing the weaknesses that are holding you back at that point, right? And that's where, you see the bands and boxes and stuff from the conjugate lifters. You see, the chains, elevated deadlifts, whatever.
Yeah,
I mean, all the crazy stuff. But yeah, so that's one of my big things that I preach with my patients. They'll be like, "Oh, we're doing this one again," and I'm like, "Well, you're not great at it yet. Like, let's master the pattern first, and then we'll start to progress it."
And that carries over. That's the same with your patients in physical therapy. That's the same with my clients with personal training and general health, and that should be the same in a sport, especially in a sport like powerlifting. They say, I don't know the saying, I'm going to butcher it. It's like tens of thousands of repetitions need to be done in order to master a movement.
Oh yeah.
It's probably more than that, right? It's like shooting a free throw.
100,000 hours, you become a master.
Boom. I butchered it. Josh knew it. So that adds up. You know what I mean? So if you're starting out as a young lifter if you have that mindset, master that movement, and then get to the point where you could do it in your sleep. You look at it, it looks very, very sound. And then you could venture into different variation, safety bar work,
camber bar
potentially. No, you rest in peace.
God, I'm still hurting.
You can throw on chains. I think bands are not for everybody. They're for very, very advanced lifters. But I think that is a thing with modern social media and the internet and everything. People see the craziness that you can do in a training session. And that's what I got to do. Yeah, that's what I got to do.
Yeah.
And it's not for everybody. They got to understand that these are people who are doing that and are successful with that, have been training for years and years and years and have already established themselves to a certain level. But I guarantee you, when they were 1, 2, 3 years into it, they were doing 5x5s, 5-3-1s, squat, bench, and deadlift competition style, overhead press, dips, barbell rows, stuff like that. It was not fancy, but it was building the foundation.
Yeah.
So sometimes I see young lifters who are trying to do like a conjugate or concurrent style programming because they see the variety. And that's one thing that's really cool about it. There's variety and interesting movements, right? It's very appealing and it's very fun. But they do it when they don't have the foundation built. They're not a master yet, and then they get good at maybe that variation, and then you have them do the competition style movement,
And it's hot
and it's
trash.
not there.
Yeah.
It's not there. I don't care if you can squat 5 plates to a box on a safety squat bar against 2 chains aside, and it's
Two
smoked.
chains.
But then you get under a straight bar. Do you think 2 chains lifts? Save that. And then you get and then you get under a straight bar to do a competition squat, and it falls apart. You can't have that.
Yeah.
So that's where you need to reevaluate, what is it that I'm trying to accomplish? Because if I want to be really good at what I'm doing, and my dad would say, if you're going to do something, do it right. Do it right. Don't, put your ego aside, and don't just do this because it looks cool or it seems cool or it feels cool. Do it because there's a reason you need to do it. But if there's not a reason you need to do it right now, don't. And I think going back to the basics is hugely overlooked.
So kind of progressing from like younger lifters, let's get into the more like advanced lifters, right? I think, and you can correct me if you disagree at all, but I think that advanced lifters, one of the biggest things as far as programming for them can the best thing you can do for them is not make things overly complicated, right?
Yes.
They've mastered a movement, and now at that point, it's just working on the weaknesses they have to make that movement stronger or more efficient or whatever. Would you agree or disagree with that?
I would agree. I think there's a trend. There's probably a graph out there somewhere. Cody Miller probably knows it. But when you're starting out, it's all about learning how to move. All right.
Oh yeah.
First couple years, learn how to move, learn what you're doing,
and get a good pump.
and get a pump to go out
You got to get that
to
pump.
go out to the parties.
Yeah, we're not
You know
telling
what I
you not to go do your bicep curls,
Yeah,
your whatever. But
Yeah.
that's not what we're saying.
So that's the first few years of training. Then you get into the point where you really start trying to build and establish some strength, because you have that foundation. Now you're really pushing it. You're getting that extra work in, the little bit heavier loads and intensities. So you're going up. And then you get to the point when you become more of an advanced lifter where it becomes, try not to kill myself, because every training session you're handling weights that are very hard on your body.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, how can I get the most bang for my buck? So starting out, it's movement. Then it goes to, I need to work hard and do a lot of work because my body can handle it. Then it becomes, how do I get the most out of just doing as much as I need to do? Right? So it does become more specific as you go and working more on weak points.
I would say
And
that's
that-
a perfect way to describe it.
Finding the weak points is the biggest thing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're newer, everything's a weak point.
Oh yeah.
So train everything and you'll get better, right? But when you're lifting 5, 6, 7, 800 pounds week in and week out, you have to be very precise. Do only as much as you need to get the stimulus. And then all of your other work is either injury prevention or recovery work
Mm-hmm.
to help get you to the next session. So that's where I think frequency is very important at a younger age. And then variation gets more important the better you get, to keep you healthy and to build on the weak points.
Yeah. And then kind of also rabbit trailing a little bit, but going off of what you said, you brought up, injury recovery, stuff like that, right? I think the biggest thing people need to do is listen to their bodies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your body's going to tell you how you feel, what you should be doing. And that's like your coach, and you need to talk about, if you have a coach and he's programming you 5 days a week, and you're like, I got to get this lift in, and then you feel like trash and you end up hurting yourself, you don't have to get that lift in.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you need to tell him, like, this is too much for me right now. Have that conversation, right? Listen to your body. I tell my patients that all the time. Like, I know I gave you exercises to do. Listen to your body first. Start slow, work in. This isn't like you must do this all the time. Like, let's talk about it, see how you do with it, right? Sleep. Number one thing you can do, get good sleep. And then the second, eat your food, drink your water.
Yeah.
If you do those two things, I mean, you're going to have really good recovery. There's all these fancy things out there you can do for recovery. And honestly, like, the human body thrives really well on work, sleep, and food.
Yeah. But those get more important the longer that you do
and
this.
you just need to be consistent with them and good at them. And if you're not, you'll notice the effects, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's when, injuries occur.
Sure. Now, I got a question for you.
Okay.
When you have a patient, let's use my father as example. He is 62, I
Mhm.
believe, has had some type of physical labor job since the day he was born,
Mhm.
pretty much. Grew up, the family owned a sawmill and a farm, and they did that. And he ended up having to drop out of school to support the family and things like that. So he's worked as a bricklayer, a mason, in a steel company.
So he's probably like the strongest dude you know.
My father is mentally and physically the strongest man I've ever met.
Yeah.
And but when you have him come in, he's had his knee replaced, he's had surgery on his hand, he's broken his back. When you have somebody like that come in who's never listened to their body,
Mhm.
and they don't know what it means to listen to their body, because him listening to his body is him in his mind telling him to do more. He just retired. The dude still gets up 4:30, 5 o'clock every morning because that's all he knows. So how do you work with somebody like that?
So I think what I like to do as a therapist, and what I would recommend for a lot of coaches to do as well, is you have to have a conversation with people. And a lot of times it's a hard conversation. Sometimes you can be like, look, what you're doing clearly hasn't worked for you, and it's led you down a road of whatever. We got to change some things. The hard part is that stuff's not always perfect, and it doesn't. Rome wasn't built in a day.
Sure,
You're not going to fix somebody in a day. You offer them your advice of like, hey, maybe let's rest a little more. Let's focus a little more on sleep. You clearly do a lot. Let's, get your nutrition better. Let's get you moving a little better first. Try to steer them in a better path that way. And then over time, if they start to see improvements, then they'll catch on and start to pick up on that stuff. I treat a lot of blue collar workers out where I am. And that's a frequent conversation I have. Everything has broken in their body.
Right.
They're all busted up. They can't move. And
are they pretty hard-headed?
We're in Western Pennsylvania, blue collar Western Pennsylvania, man. There is no more stubborn person than a blue collar Western Pennsylvanian steel mill worker.
I respect it.
I mean, it's just,
I respect it.
Those dudes they're tough as they come. And I mean, the women are even tougher.
Yeah, because they had to put up with it.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so it's just a big portion of it is, figuring out how the body's gonna respond and adapt, and sometimes it's taking 10 steps backwards to start going forwards.
No, that's
it's
cool.
hard conversations for people because you're changing livelihoods at that point. Like you got to change habits, and it's hard.
You're talking 30, 40, 50 years of a particular habit that you're trying to break and trying to fix.
And this goes into too, I mean, I have conversations with people about like drinking and smoking and all sorts of stuff like that, where like, hey, we need to take a step back. This is hurting your healing. And that's why you're like, what's your diet looking like? I don't give like dietary advice, but definitely steer them along the path of like, maybe get a nutritionist involved and start going down that road, because that's something you would probably benefit from.
Right. Now, knowing what you know now, we're kind of going back into our training. Knowing what you know now and looking back on all the training that you've done, everything you've learned, all the mentors that you've had, what would you say were some of the biggest takeaways from that whole process to where you are now? I know that's kind of like a loaded question.
So are you asking like what I would do differently, or?
Sure. Let's go. What would you do differently?
Okay.
And what are some of the top, 1 to 2 things
that I like learned along the way?
That you learned along the way.
So what I would do differently, I would have listened to my body, slept more, probably stayed away from as much caffeine as I did. I was done with that.
Wait, you drink less caffeine now than you used to?
Oh yeah, man.
Wow.
I probably,
that's impressive.
In college, undergrad, I probably drank like multiple grams of caffeine a day. Like it probably was not good.
That's amazing.
Yeah, no, it's not amazing. It's not okay. I averaged like 4 hours of sleep a night.
Now he's getting 5 to 6, so improvement.
Oh, come on, 6, 7.
Yeah. So just listen to your body more.
Yeah, if I would have just listened to my body more and not just been like, I have to do this, whatever, I just wouldn't have banged myself up so bad,
Sure.
And then also, I think pride gets in the way a lot. Like, I know I'm strong enough to do a certain thing. I can push myself to do better. I used to do like max out in the gym all the time when I go, and that's just dumb, you know.
Yeah.
And it was all because of I was so prideful when I went in the gym. I wanted to be stronger. I wanted to be whatever. If I would have just like taken a step back and not cared
Mhm.
about like not just been prideful about what I was lifting, I think I would have gotten so much better, so much faster, and just not carried that much fatigue into everything,
Mhm.
you know. But some things I've learned along the way. That's a tough one. I think, well, one, just working hard, right?
Yeah.
Every time I'm in there, I'm working hard.
Mhm.
Even on days I don't want to be there, you go in, you show up, you work hard.
Mhm.
I think movement quality over the amount of weight you're moving.
Huge.
I think that's
Huge.
the biggest thing that
Yep.
I've taken away. And I mean, my coach Rob has really like pushed that with me, because I just, as I said, I used to just go away. I just wanted to throw
Mhm.
weights around. That was my favorite thing.
Mhm.
So movement quality over the amount of weight I'm moving. And I'm just gonna stop there. I think that's good.
Okay. Okay. No, all very good, and kind of along the same lines of what I would say. I think two of the biggest things that I've learned. I'm going to start with that first. Continue to show up.
Mm-hmm.
Continue to show up, and sometimes learn to rely on yourself. Continue to show up, because there are going to be many, many days that you don't feel like walking into a gym. More days than not. And the longer you're in this, the more days you're going to have like that. Continue to show up, because good things are going to happen. And it's going to help you learn something, and it's going to open new doors. It's just like work. It's just like, building anything in life. So those days that you wake up and that alarm clock goes off, and, it's telling you to get back in bed, you can either get back in bed or you can get your ass in the gym. And it may be the worst training session that you've had in a long time, but you got better, you showed up, and you learned something,
Mm-hmm.
and you developed a habit. That's the biggest thing, because a lot of this is about developing habits. Doesn't matter if you're powerlifting, cross country running, marathon, cycling, whatever.
Body thrives off a routine.
Exactly. So establish those habits for the long run.
Mm-hmm.
What was the other thing?
What would you have done differently?
No. What was the other thing I said?
Oh, I don't know. I don't listen to you.
Show up and rely on yourself. I was testing you guys. Come on, I know it the whole time. Rely on yourself more often, okay? Instead of relying on somebody else. And what I mean by that is, when you started out, you didn't know what you were doing, but you did it, right? And look what you learned. When I started out, I never asked for help with my training. If I found somebody, or if I met somebody, then we trained together and we figured it out on our own. But I would stay up till 2 to 3 in the morning, and I would find articles and I would learn. Then I would go to the gym and apply it. I didn't beg people to help me. I wasn't dying to have people come and wrap my knees and stuff like that. And that's part of the process, and that helps you learn a lot of things. So I think more people need to rely on themselves and show up. Just show up.
Show the heck up.
That's it. But what would I have done differently? I probably would have taken it less serious, to an extent. I thought that there was like a 2 to 3 year span where I thought that powerlifting was everything.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
To the point where I may have ruined a couple friendships, but maybe they weren't meant to be. I don't really know. I still haven't figured it out. I missed family gatherings. I missed birthday parties and stuff like that, because I thought that powerlifting was the end all be all. And if I went in the session, or if I went into a training session and I had a bad day, it would ruin my day.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And now I'm learning, and it's funny because I'm continuing to progress in the sport, but I'm understanding the big picture of where the sport is in my life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people say that you have to be 100% all in. And maybe to be the absolute best singular individual in the entire world, you do, right? But what is the percentage of people who truly are trying to get there? It's really not that many. So for the majority of people, the majority of us training, the majority of us lifting, whatever, understand that this is a small thing in the overall, you know, in our overall life.
Yeah.
Right? What it should be, training should be one of your top few priorities, you know, but it shouldn't always be number one. And I think if it is, take a step back and reevaluate everything.
Yeah.
Because I've learned so much more and my life has become so much more complete since I took a step back and realized where it truly stood in my life.
My training's better when I don't hold it on a pedestal.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, dude, I came in here with no expectation after 3 weeks of not deadlifting and pulled 805.
Yeah, because you're a freak.
But the thing is, when I'm in the midst of training and I have these expectations and I hold training on a pedestal,
Yep.
I haven't done that. I haven't been able to do that. But the second I step back, I start focusing on other areas of my life.
And training's fun.
And training becomes fun, then I can do stuff like that.
Yep.
So now it's about that balance. And when they say that you can't have balance in a sport like this, I don't 100% agree.
Yep.
So that's me. But
yeah,
I'd be interested to hear what a lot of other people have to say who've been training for a long time.
I bet you some similar stuff.
You know, I mean, in the overall grand scheme of things, I think I've been training for 12 to 13 years. You've been training longer, I think, right?
Less. I think actually seriously training less.
Okay.
For sure. Probably it would have been since like 2014. So.
Okay. So I've only been competing 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
But there's people out there who have been just working out in general for decades or competing for decades. So I'd be interested to see what their mindset is, because there's a good chance what we're sitting here saying right now, 10 years down the road might be different.
Be like, idiot.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Understand that what you believe now isn't necessarily going to be the same thing you believe in a couple years, but that's part of the process. That's part of learning and evolving. So that's the fun of it.
Yeah.
But I mean, to sum it all up, you know, listen to your body.
Work hard, move well.
Work hard, move well.
Sleep and eat.
Sleep, eat. But just don't get too ahead of yourself.
Yeah.
You know, don't do so much research and reading and that you paralyze yourself of progress and knowledge.
Yep.
You know, find one or two things, try them, see how they work. Don't change too many variables, because if you're adjusting and changing and adding too many variables,
you don't know what worked.
Yeah, you don't know what worked
or what hurt.
And you don't know how to apply it in the future.
Yep.
So,
yeah.
Anything to add?
I don't think so, man. I think you summed it up great.
Yeah. No, that was a fun one. That's something that I think a lot of people need to hear. And if you want to talk to us, stop in. We'll dig a little deeper and we'll see how that fits within your life and your routine.
Hit us up, guys. We're always here for you. If you need any accountability, any training advice, anything at all, we're here at Union Fitness.
Have a good one, guys. Take care.